Pop in, say hi. If you've never come into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. We're going to give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. Let people know that I have gone live. I am late today, and not even for a good reason. Like, I have lost an entire day somewheres along the line. I thought today was Saturday. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes to get in here, unless they decided to jump ship and teach me a lesson. And it would be a lesson that, sometimes we need that little bit of tough love, that little bit of holding accountability for ourselves. It is in my emotions when I feel bad. And when I come in here tonight, I just felt so bad. You should have seen me for the past 5 minutes scurrying around the apartment when I realized what I had done, right? It was actually kind of strange how I discovered that I'm supposed to be live right now. Oh my goodness. Oh, and I thought it was Saturday today. I thought it was Saturday today. I was in my YouTube analytics and I just go in there and see how everything is doing and everything. And I counted my uploads this week and I went 7 uploads. That means I posted every day. That means, and I always take Saturdays off. And I'm thinking, well, maybe because sometimes if I come in too close to midnight, that they will count that live as the next day's live. And that's kind of what I thought was going on there. And then I thought, oh my goodness, Cindy, and I looked at the date at the bottom of my computer screen here, and it said 5/4. And I went and I looked at my calendar it says Sunday here. What? And immediately I went into panic mode because I put the two and two together. Why I'd had 7 postings this week, when in actuality I should have only had 6. My five, what's my good cheers, and my one chatters live. So yeah, I have no idea. It's a miracle you're here. I'm here, you guys, because I laid down. I never nap. Hello, Andrew. I never nap. I'm like Andrew last week that I just oh my goodness, I'm tired. And I did go for a really long walk today. I did poop myself out. I stopped by a store. There was an amazing deal on 10-pound bags of potatoes, but I was on a walk, but it was a deal at the same time. And I should have taken my backpack with me. But instead, what I did is I purchased a recycle bag, and right, I hauled that thing around with me on my afternoon walk. I don't think I was gone more than a couple hours, maybe 3 hours at the most. And then when I came home, I sat down for a few minutes, and I guess the air conditioner felt really good. You guys, it hit almost 30 degrees here in Winnipeg, Manitoba in the beginning of May. That's absolutely incredible. That's global warming. That's global warming for you. But this, for me, I understand it as a natural phenomenon. These are cycles that we go through, constantly go through. That's why we've never really had a handle on the weather, because the weather is in a constant state of change, and it is a surprise. And it's kind of curious too, isn't it, you guys, that we've got a handle on so many things, that we control so many things, but we cannot control the weather. And what just popped into my mind there, I was going to say, well, maybe that's not true, because I came across a post yesterday. It was a little film clip, right? And it was how the rich people in the Middle East, the oil princes and stuff, how they actually see the clouds and they're making things green again. So that's pretty neat. But that's the technology, that's the innovation, right? That things are in a constant state of change, and right, if we don't move with it, we are going to fall. We're going to fall behind, right? But that's the way it is in every generation. I know how my mother was, when, and even then there was technology. I know my dad loved stereo equipment in the 60s and 70s. That's the thing. You were the cool guy if you had some great big 7 foot high speakers, which my dad did, maybe not 7 foot high, but big speakers and big systems with lots of buttons and stuff that we were not allowed to touch. I think there were 2 buttons. We were allowed to turn this button on and this button on. We weren't allowed to do anything else. And then after the systems got a little bit older, then we were allowed to play the records and stuff. And my dad always had these great big tire ear muff headphones in those days, and you would be plugged in with these cords that were as thick as my finger, like telephone cords, and you would drag that all over the place. But my dad loved music, all kinds of music. He loved Santana. I remember that. um, but it was the classical music for my dad. He loved the big bands. He loved marching bands. He loved symphonies. He loved um, it's not just the symphonies, but the big productions, the ballet orchestras, right? He loved the opera, and he would take me to these shows all the time when I was a little kid, and it was my taste of culture, and that was something my dad did for me, and that was a pretty amazing, that my dad, he would take me outside of the family, like these, we were always doing family drives, and my dad liked to do the drives because he'd have the whole family combined in one space, and he was able to, right, like the Gestapo, get all the ins and what the entire family was doing, and he loved that. He loved kind of being the king of his castle. And it wasn't just the houses that we lived in that was his castle. His family was his castle. My father was a very loving man, very adventurous, curious, and a very strong man emotionally, because he got a lot of butting heads, and he had his ideas, a way of thinking, and he lived by that. And I don't remember anybody ever succeeding in swaying him from that. There were times when he had to humble himself, and that was uncomfortable. I was always sad and embarrassed and humiliated for him, because it was something my mother forced him to do. It was kind of like punishment for my dad, when he'd get us in those sticky situations with his gambling and stuff. And I remember as a little child that you know our mom dressing us up and sitting out in the lobby of a big gambling hotel, Harris Club or whatever it was in the 70s. And my father would have to go in and talk to the casino managers to see if he could get enough money to get us back home. We lived in Vancouver. It was a 24-hour drive, just less than 24-hour drive to Nevada. And my dad loved Reno, but he loved Vegas too. So he did both. And lots of those times he would take me on those trips, and we would do these magnificent trips, just me and my dad, whether it was fishing, whether it was driving down to Reno, and he'd put me up in a hotel, and he would take off gambling. And these are things that, right, in the 70s, it wasn't too much mind put into um, the security and watching over our children like we do these days, right? It was a rough and tumble. You guys know, right? 60s, 70s. Even the playgrounds were super dangerous. I remember this spinning round plate with bars, and you had to hold on to it. It would just spin and spin, and people would walk and run outside holding the bars and spinning this thing, and kids would fly off it. Oh my goodness, it was like danger zone. But we didn't have supervision. My parents were watching over us, right? Remember jumping on a bus at like 5 years old, and I would go down to Stanley, but we lived in Vancouver, go down to Stanley Park and hang out at the beach all day. Oh my goodness, we were feral kids. But at the same time, my dad had four girls that did need some supervision. My mother worked full time. She had to work full time. My dad was living an adventure, right? Lots of you guys, you know that story of my dad and his congenital heart failure and that diagnosis that he wasn't going to live for very long. He lived twice as long as what they gave him, more than twice as long as what they gave him, and he had to live with that every single morning, waking up every single morning with that possibility that today might be my last day, and he lived that way, you guys. And I guess that's part of my, it's not going to say persona, but it's part of that makeup of myself, right? That I live the best life that I possibly can for myself. Now it's a little different. I'm creating the best human being I possibly can. And sometimes I feel I fail myself in that. But I'm only expected to do the best that I can. Understanding, in that dictation of how things work out, I'm not the only player in that. And, I recognize that. I'm not going to take all the blame for that, but I'm going to definitely take my fair share in what I contributed to that. And wow, we were a very dynamic family, but every family is a dynamic. Every family is a dynamic family because no two families are alike, and that's going to be a truth. That's going to be a very controlling family if that is the case. I suspect I shouldn't have said no two families are alike because I suspect because lots of this stuff that happens to us is just epigenetic, is just handed down from one generation to the next. And that's why families have such a difficult time getting out of that slump of possibly living in a way that never had the opportunity to improve it or improve on itself. I think in my family it might have been in a little bit of lost and maybe found, or the opportunity, the potential to be found again. And I believe that. I believe my nieces and my nephews and my great nieces and nephews are going to make sure of that. And I will do my fair share, right? In that little bit of pedaling that I do, that I'll do my part in the most optimistic way that I can, right? Understanding I am treading water, but sometimes, miracles do happen. It is in our attitudes and the way we go about life, and we can let life get us down, and it's not like that hasn't happened even in my own family. My uncle took his own life, right? But that can't be on me. And lots of times in these things that we pass down from one generation to the next generation is the guilt and the shame in pulling away in what has been the norm for maybe decades, lifetimes, right? Thousands of years. And it is in our choices. And it is in that want to do better by our children, isn't that? And there's a fine line in that because sometimes we can go to the next extreme, right? If you're really heavy handed on your children in one way, that sometimes we want to do better by that and not have that heavy hand in the next generation. And we become overcompensating, right? And maybe very lenient where the children don't get an opportunity to advance in that way either. So it's in the happy medium. For me, that's where I like to be. And it's also where there's an opportunity for forgiveness. There's an opportunity to learn from mistakes, and there's an opportunity to learn from people who you might not have ever had the opportunity to learn from before because, right, that just wasn't part of the programming. So, yeah, I'm not going to say, right, that no two families are alike because it's going to take some time. But it's happening, you guys, isn't it? Right? We see lots of changing. So I think we are a lot more lenient, a lot more understanding, a lot more tolerant, even, right? And that's tough if you are brought up, if that's your generation, to hate on that or to butt heads with that or treat that like, oh, right? That is hard in overcoming ourselves to do a little bit better. But that's all that expected. And I think if we over stumbled over ourselves without being an actual charity like Salvation Army or Goodwill or these organizations that actually help people step up from where they were at. And I've been a part of those programs and so grateful for the lessons and for the opportunities that come across my path. I'm ready for some of those now. I can see clearly that I'm in need of some of that now because I thought today was Saturday. If I hadn't been in my analytics and noticed that I had posted 7 times this week and then been a little bit curious as, wait, I don't post 7 days, I post 6 days, right? 5 days of my what's my good cheer and then chatters live on Sunday. That's six, that's not seven. And then being curious about that and actually picking up a physical calendar, which I always keep here and go, oh my goodness, right? I posted every day this week. So I'm going to congratulate myself, number one, because that's always an extra push. That's an extra bit of motivation that goes into momentum that goes into this week's contribution. And right, used to say if that was just the little bit extra push that I needed to, because that could have been teetering just at the very top on the hill. And now you just, that one extra touch, right? It's not falling backwards because, right, there was no momentum, but extra, that extra post that I did this week. This is the way I think, these, right? Because it's quite possible. I've seen so many people just hit it on one silly thing. I don't want it to be one silly thing. I don't. I want it to be that accumulation of the little baby steps because that's the evidence for other people who decide to come on board and give it a shot. Everybody feels sometimes that they have to go gung ho, but I believe that every one of us now has a persona online. You have your Facebook. That's where I started. I wasn't even working in working on social media, building brands and stuff. I wasn't doing any of that. But I was on Facebook, right? Liking my sister's silly vacation trips, or, you know, being stuck in a time where I'm not able, and we're going to stop right now, set some good cheer, get to your destination, turn around because it's a false alarm, head right back to the station. And today is the perfect barbecue night. For sure, they have got their barbecue going on. They have a crappy little barbecue too, right? They're part of our community. They do so much in our building. They're usually here in this building once a day, right? We have a lot of elderly, we have a lot of vulnerable that are here, and that is a part of life, right? But it's so amazing that they're here all the time, and they give that amazing um, service, right? And care to the tenants of this building. And I was thinking we have a small stage up at the street. It's not used very often. I think that was the intent, that maybe that they could get little bands or little weekend for the tourists to come in. It would be a nice little spot to have a little, I don't know, little kiosks or pop-up shops or something in. But there's benches in there, and sometimes the homeless go and sit there. Sometimes when people are waiting for a bus, they'll, if they know their bus isn't coming for 10 minutes, they'll sit on those benches. But for the most part, it's not used. And I was thinking, setting up a little setup there, and maybe a table and a couple of chairs where I could actually sit and actually interact, or maybe stand and interact with some of the community, this community that I'm a part of, the actual where I live in. And being that station, I thought maybe I could have a big jar or something, and we could collect money. Because you guys hear me all the time saying, get to your destination, let it be a false alarm, and let them go back and, right, get back to that barbecue that they were having, right, with those T-bone steaks and stuff, and let them have an enjoyable evening. And I do this all the time. But their barbecue, I walked down that back lane. I could peek through the fence. I could see what their little scrappy barbecue looks like. And right, it would sure be nice if we could set them up something where they actually had sinks, right? They've got their like their big gas propane tanks and stuff all locked up in a cage and stuff. But right, to be able to have a barbecue that's just set up and permanent there, something like one of those big mansions do. Now I thought, well, maybe we could drum some money up, like do a Christmas in July or something, and just spend a weekend, because I know my building alone would contribute to something like that. We can get them all sorted out with a decent summer setup. Wouldn't that be amazing and heartfelt? Something that the community could give back, but not have to do it on an individual basis, because it's not something I would ever be able to afford. But sometimes, because it is my dream, one of my goals, to be a philanthropist, right? To be able to give back in big ways. But sometimes in that giving back, sometimes it's just somebody coming up with that idea, and that's me giving back. But somebody else is going to contribute part of the funds to set up that barbecue, or actually maybe it's the group coming in to actually build it. Maybe we're going to bricklay it and everything, right? Maybe, right? Maybe it'll be truly a community event, and we do something magnificent for a service that has served this community for a very long time. I have been in this neighborhood in for decades, you guys. In all honesty, I have shifted, right, in the neighborhood, but I haven't left truly the neighborhood. It is an amazing neighborhood, and it is being revitalized. There's a lot of new going on in here, and it's an interesting dynamic community where you have the punk rockers and the emus and the homeless and the elderly and the hip community and the woke community and the entrepreneurs and the well-to-dos, and it is a community mixed like a Heinz 57. Okay, these comments are rolling tonight. I'm going to come back here again. My apologies. I thought it was Saturday. I usually take Saturdays offline. The reason being why I took off today, and I just went for a walk. I stood at the end of a busy street, and I stood there for 5 minutes deciding what direction I wanted to go in, because the things that I could do, like that big 10-pound bag of potatoes that I dragged around on a walk, and I don't know how much I saved. I might have saved $4 on this bag of potatoes. But Cindy is in budget mode, and I did. I went for a walk today carrying around a 10-pound bag of potatoes. It might have even been a 20-pound bag of potatoes. It might have been 10 gigs. I don't know. I dragged it around. It was heavy. I was switching arms because I wasn't even using my backpack. And usually when I go for these walks, I take my backpack. But because it was so hot outside, it almost hit 30 Celsius here, you guys, today. The last time I looked, it's 26 Celsius right now in Winnipeg, Manitoba. That's really hot. That's a nice hot summer day. But take into consideration, it's only the first week of May, right? And that's pretty crazy, and that was pretty amazing. And reason being that I am in my moo today. It's a short moo. It's actually from the 60s or 70s. This one has got a very old tag. It's made in Maui. Probably a tourist dress. When you go to Hawaii in those days, it was a big thing because taking plane trips was something fairly new at that time too, wasn't it? And going on a vacation like that, all the women, and I've seen this dress online many times. I was able to get my hands on two of them, but I kept one of them because it was so amazing. The quality, like they don't make things like they used to. And this is over 50 years old. This dress is over 50 years old, but it's like brand new, and it has no flaws in it, right? A nice durable house dress, right? It was my day off today. It was a day I was spending. Let me have a sip of my coffee, you guys. I just woke up from a nap, in all honesty. Just call me Andrew. Yeah, just the way, the serendipities and how it all worked out. Otherwise, you guys, I might have gone, I would have woken up and go, oh my goodness, beautiful evening. Let's go get a drink. Let's go for a walk into the village. I live in a village, you guys. It's like, well, Owen would know this because he lives in Brooklyn, but what do you call that village? Uh, oh, oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. But I know Owen will cough it up. I'll come right down to the comments and then go right back up there because I know Owen will know. But I live in a village, and it's a very hip little village with shops, lots of restaurants, lots of sushi restaurants and hot pot restaurants and Middle Eastern restaurants. There are a couple of nightclubs in this village, but it's a unique little town village. No, Greenwich Village, Owen. Greenwich Village. It's like Greenwich Village, but our village here in Winnipeg, we call it Osborne Village, and they shut it down. Well, they haven't in the past few years since COVID, but they usually make it a big celebration, and they shut down the two ends of the street. And for blocks and blocks, it's just outdoor markets and food kiosks and yeah, it's just a big party, beer gardens, and it's a big celebration. I'm not sure whether they're going to do it this year. They haven't been, but that's not to say it's not going to come back. Lots of things have changed, haven't they, since 2020? Things have changed quite a bit. I know for myself, it took me a while because I have shaken hands after COVID, but it's, in going for job interviews, it's just kind of that instinct. It's in that, the way I was brought up, it was the thing to, when you meet somebody, to shake a hand. So that took a while for me to kind of dissipate. Otherwise, I would have brought that into my work atmosphere when I went into that little thrift store. But yeah, those days of shaking hands, hugging. I am a hugger. I've always been that hugger. That's the codependent, clinging onto my dad's leg, in those relationships that were so important for me, that I nurtured, that I shined on, and surprisingly, they shined on me. It was a mutual exchange, and in that movement that we make, those are in our choices. It could have been a different choices for me, right? And we all get to make those choices in our life. But I am so grateful for all those little hints. Me waking up from my nap when I did. I went for a nap when I came home from my walk today. I was bagged that 10-pound bag of potatoes, and that heat, which was the first day of actual summer weather. And like I said, it's only the beginning of May. We usually don't go into summer until pretty much the middle or the end of June. And then by the middle of August, it's already starting to die back again. But it is wonderful. It's right, and it's just like having those winter days, those cold winter days where there are actually mud puddles or raindrops, and we had a couple of those this winter too. And things are changing. Even this province that I live in. Again, if you've never come into one of my lives before, I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I am a Canadian, and I notice the changes, and if you know anything about the geological history of Manitoba, this used to be a great tropical sea. We're talking palm trees. We're talking megalodon. We're talking, right? Um, if you go further north, there are a lot of fossil fuels, a lot of, right. It's because because it's the sea floor, right, and there's a high amount of cancers up in that area from the fossils that just kind of seep out of the ground, right. Things are still decomposing and still, right, surfacing through the cracks and the holes in the ground. I'm not a geologist, but I am familiar in the relationships that I have to have been educated a little bit, in what is detrimental to our well-being in certain areas. But yeah, we used to be a tropical sea here in Manitoba. But again, it's those cycles, right? And we will be a tropical sea once again, I'm sure. Like, is it possible that we could get a tsunami come in through Hudson Bay and have Hudson Bay drain into the prairies? I don't know. I'm not a geologist in that, but it seems like a quite possible because the Hudson Bay drains in from the Atlantic Ocean, right? So I would assume if there were some really significant waves coming up through those channels that lead into the bay, that it could possibly overspill into the prairies because we are the prairies after all. Prairies being flat land. Like if it wasn't for these buildings that are situated right here where I'm sitting, skyscrapers and stuff, I would probably be able to see out into the distance by miles, right? I don't know if any of my audience here is familiar with the prairies, but it is beautiful because you get a clear picture, and to be able to see that long view landscape, that's pretty spectacular. And to be able to look at a lake for probably a half an hour before you actually make it up to driving alongside it, that's pretty amazing. And we do have small hills, but mountains, we don't have mountains here in Manitoba. You really have to go pretty far north and pretty far east in order to see that change in the geographical, right? And it was something that was right. It was valuable for Manitoba because when we were first being explored, it was the buffalo. The buffalo roamed the prairie. So, and because buffalo was so needed in their pelts over in England and Europe, that it was an opportunity to really explore the prairies and the other things that had to offer, like the beaver, right? Because beaver hats got to be very popular. But it was the voyageurs. If it wasn't for if it wasn't for the fur traders, who's to say we might possibly been part of the United States, because the United States would have explored up here, right? Lewis and Clark would have gotten up here, and right, it would have all been claimed. They got Alaska. Like, how did that happen? You got United States way down here, and then way up there, got this little. Like, I know what happened. $1 million for Alaska. What a score that was, hey? What a score that was. But that's tough living up there. Okay, truly, you guys, I'm coming into the comments now, okay? And see who's all here. Hello, Owen. Owen first in here today. Yeah, that, and I've already named the village. The village. I already lost the name of the village. But Greenwich Village, yeah. So the area that I live in is very dynamic, and I'm a dynamic person. Like I said, I don't relate to any age particular, so I get along with all types of people. I have floated with the suits. I have floated with the in crowd. I have floated with the intellectuals and the sports and the analytical. Surprisingly, I have no idea, but sometimes, you know even though the analyticals are very analytical, if you had an opportunity, right? Because they're lonely too. They want friends too. They want a life outside of the craziness of numbers and the obsession of whatever they're doing. That's what analyticals are doing, because they're always doing, right? But that doesn't mean that they never wanted to be part of the in crowd or they never wanted to work on sports. It's just they put that energy in the studies. They put that energy into something else that would serve them. And so the talents that they have, right, the in crowd is not going to have, right? Sports are not going to have that. They do. You hear of people that are really good at sports, but they don't want to play football, but they're good at it. So they take the scholarship so that they can be the brain surgeon, right? And then the football is only the hobby, right? Where being the brain surgeon is the dream, is the pursuit, is the goal. Lots of people like that, right? But on the norm, it's not the norm, right? Again, that's in our choices, isn't it? Right? Because you have to apply yourself, and that would be hard. to excel, right? Because in order to play college and university football, you got to be pretty darn good, right? Especially get the scholarships, and especially if you're in the states, because the states are big on football. Football is different here, for my viewers here, or my viewers in Europe. Football is soccer, right? But here in North America, our football is like big shoulder pads and taking people out and big helmets and stuff, and it's not like little ballerinas flipping in the air and doing those toe kicks to the net. That doesn't happen. You're getting your brains and your body battered a little bit in that, but it's just as exciting. And you know, it is a little bit in our toughness that we are going to survive, and that's the resilience, right? That's that resilience, and we have to find those ways to be resilient in the right in what we're doing. Yeah. And again, it is all our choices. But like I said too, that different groups have different aspects, because I was not meant to be too much, in all honesty. But because of my dreams and because of my goals and because of my dad's um interaction with me, those lessons that we naturally pick up, from the people around us who are the evidence in that, even if we're not getting a sit down conversation. I had lots of sit down conversation, but I didn't recognize this as mindset. I didn't recognize this as lessons or anything like that, right? I wasn't looking into it like that. That was just my relationship with my father, and right, and I was able to build an amazing relationship that was able to carry me into a future that, even if my life sucked, everything failed on me, if I couldn't get a heads up, here I've been on YouTube for 10 years, that I can't poke my head out of it. That's okay, because that gift that my father gave to me in that taking of the life that I want for myself, right? Not at anybody else's expense, but to take every drop that I want, dreams, goals, ambitions, not to let anybody else keep me down there. And then to look at everything like an adventure, right? Because in that codependency relationship that I had with my father, if anybody said, Cindy, we're going here, do you want to go? And I'd be like, even before you finish the sentence, I'm in. And not only I'm in, right? In my hypervigilance and in my sense of control, okay? Because I come from a dynamic family, and even though I don't have narcissistic traits in me, I do have very controlling traits. And sometimes when I'm triggered, right, I will go to what works, and right, whatever my mother did, that worked, and that's what I picked up. So it's very important for me to catch myself when I'm triggered like that, and bring myself right back down. But these were lessons that I learned along the way, those quotes that I grew up on, that my dad loved so much, and he brought up his kids on those quotes, right? That somehow something sticked. And you know I am optimistic. I have a fun life. I do. What I'm doing is lots of fun. It's hard. It's frustrating. Most of the time, you don't see the movement in that. It's a very, I'm not saying lonely job, but it's a very an alone job, because you're doing stuff that other people really aren't interested in doing. But because it's my passion, and it's adding so much to my movement and to my what I believe is to those other parts of me, that their well being, that possibly being diminished, right? That I can partner with myself and do a little bit of damage control, so that, Cindy ain't coming back. But those other parts of me, when they come back, that they won't get sucked in, because they are codependent. And if they're codependent, that they they meet up with people that will offer up adventures and lessons, and not necessarily have to practice mindset, but they have to be adventurous in a way, because it is in the experience too, being a spectator or a participant, that we get to learn from. And people don't recognize that, right? People say, oh, life is miserable. I'm just going to sit in my chair and just stay at the computer and play my video games. And I'm just going to live my life all by myself, just like this. And there's no expansion in that in any way. And that's such a sad way to live. My dad sucked up life. I said, my dad had congenital heart failure. And my dad did the hardest jobs ever. I was actually showing my nephew some pictures of my dad. He's very interested in his grandfather, right? But this is a picture of my dad. This character right here, that's my dad. But that was when he was a lumberjack. That was after he got his diagnosis and he got his sentence, right? Which is what it was, saying, you don't have too much, get your affairs in order. And my dad ended up living at least another 30 years after that. And that's pretty incredible to be. But the only reason he was able to do it was that positive mindset, right? And because I was that codependent, because he was my universe, right? In that codependency, I was able to pick up a few things. Like I said, maybe not just those sit down conversations, because I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, but something stuck. If not in the moment, maybe I put it on a shelf and picked it up somewheres along the way. And when I better understood, it better made sense, right? That's usually how it works, right? But yeah, my dad never let anything stop him. If he wanted to do something, he did it. And he was going to live his life. And he decided to take his family along for that ride. And it was tough. But that was his choices, right? And that was my dad. And we went along for that ride. And my mother was my dad's support system. And she worked full time. She worked so hard, right? Because my dad was living in the moment. And he made sure, right, that we were all living in the moment. And that's the truth. But it's those experiences of understanding that you can still create a magnificent life for yourself, right? Because that's where the control is, right? Because we can't have any control over anybody else. It won't work otherwise. Me showing up here, right? Doing da 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 and da da da, and we should do this and da da da. That wouldn't work, right? The idea has to be for somebody else to make that decision for themselves. And I don't, right? My sister once told me that I'm a little bit preachy, and I try really hard not to be that way, because I have no intent of dictating to anybody how they should live their life. I am only in the expression of my own, being the evidence of possibly possibilities, or possibly even falling flat on my face. And even that could be a lesson, right? A lesson in what not to do. And that's the truth. These are things I am contemplating, definitely. But yeah, that was kind of strange today how it worked out. But that's from me not being grounded in a job. That's what that comes from. I'm just kind of floating around, doing my own thing, right? Trying to make myself get stuff done. How do I make this brand work? Taking in the lessons and then letting it all go, until then again you don't see anything going on, and you decide, well, you're going to move the needle yourself, and then you get re-involved in it, and it's just up and down like that. But it is fun, and this is my life. This is a life that I created through my choices, and even showing up, right? That is in my choices that I did that. And maybe it was mistake in right? Forgetting that it was Saturday. It was. But I still have that responsibility to myself, and I have that responsibility to the people that kind of hang out with me. So I'm so grateful for all those little hints along the way. Me waking up when I woke up. It was just a short nap. It was only an hour or something, right? But then being thirsty or whatever that got me out of bed when I did, and then sitting down and turning the computer back on, right? Getting a cup of coffee, opening up my eyes and just kind of right. And then even when I recognized that it was Sunday and not Saturday, because I was going to take totally, I wasn't even coming in today. It wasn't even the plan. But when I saw that I had done 7 posts this week, I just said, well, I thought maybe, because sometimes I come in too close to midnight, and if I come in too close to midnight, it counts as the next day. And I thought, oh, possibly that's what happened. But then I saw the week before I had come in on my 6th, and I went, oh my goodness, what day is it today? I better check the date. And I checked the date, and I went, it's Sunday. Then I looked at the clock, and it was like almost quarter to 8, and I go, oh my goodness, this is the latest I've ever done. But my water still wasn't boiled yet for my coffee. I was still waiting for the water to boil so I could make my cup of coffee, and I just scurried around like 100 miles an hour, set it all up, and within 5 minutes I think I was in here. Within 5 minutes, by 10 to, I was in my live show. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for still coming in, you guys. Still coming in, right? You guys know me for long enough. You know that right? You guys, well, I know Kathy and Owen, and they would be sending me emails for sure. They would be, where are you? We're all waiting for you. Nothing like that one time though, where I went live, but I set it up wrong and I put it on a private. I put it on private, but I was live. So I was just talking to myself, and I was going on for like a half an hour or 45 minutes. And I was kind of stressed because I'd never done a live before where nobody had ever come in to say hi or anything. But I didn't have one friend that night, and I spewed. Oh, I went off, and I was like gone like in the conversation for like over a half an hour for sure. And I actually think it was Kathy who sent me an email, or maybe it was Andrew who sent me an email and said, Cindy, we're waiting for you. And then I popped right back in immediately. Accidents do happen, right? Do happen. You know what I'm going to do? I think tomorrow I'm going to take the day off, right? I was saving Sunday chores, the house. I was going to do that all tonight. I think I'll still try to hack away at that because that was the plan. Seeing that I thought it was Saturday, I'm going to get that done. But possibly tomorrow, I think possibly I'll still come in like around. Just keep being proud that I got in that extra show this week. And maybe, like I said, it was teetering right on the very top of the hill and just needed that one last show to get it teetering over. And we know what happens when things come downhill. They pick up all kinds of speed and momentum and goodies along the way. That's the optimism. That's the gift of the relationship with my father, right? Lots of people have that optimism, but lots of people who have experiences in their life that are right, not so amazing. They do get beaten, they do get disillusioned. Sometimes they get angry, sometimes even revengeful. Sometimes, right, again, they pass that down and then that next generation to their kids, right? That however they were brought up, that's what's going to happen in the next generation. And but every once in a while, you know, that it's happening in my family. My nieces are doing amazing. My nephew is doing amazing. And we have this opportunity to make some movement. And I think, in that optimistic idea and keeping it light and not keeping it all that it's something that's not acceptable. I understand it's not something that is in the norm yet, right? But I think as the generations move forward, I truly believe that this is going to be for everyone. But how many of those everyone's, right? Because there is a lot of unhealthy growth out there. I'm online all the time, and even in the understandings out there in where we get it wrong when we treat people unkind. It's really crazy. You know, I got introduced to one topic of video I never watch. It's kind of like we were talking about this the other day or last week about the the dog shelter videos that I got hooked on, and I don't watch those. But I was so hooked on them, and it was just to drum up that feel good feeling in me that I could feel sad for something outside of myself instead of feeling sorry for myself, that I had something else to feel sorry for in the dogs, right? And I don't know where I'm actually going with this. It has been like right, like I forgot that it was Sunday today. Oh my goodness, that was absolutely crazy. But I lost it there, you guys. It may come back. It may come back. If it doesn't, you know what? It's our opportunity right now for me to go backwards and come in again. I haven't looked at any of the comments, you guys. Chilly and rainy here. I've been in hibernation mode. You were saying last week, Andrew, that if you came off your project that you might have a little bit of spare time for yourself. So did you get that little bit extra time so you can get a little bit of recuperation in and a little bit of Andrew time in hibernation mode? I love the dark, rainy, chilly days too. Just sitting here. That's why the big picture windows are so important for me. I just love weather. Like today was different. It was really hot. There was a beautiful breeze out. Everybody was out and about, and it was really beautiful. It wasn't the norm. It's the first really gorgeous short swimming suit day this year, right? You're not going to, there's probably still ice on the lakes, right? But it's a beautiful day. Otherwise, you could have laid out on a blanket and could have gotten a little suntan. I might even gotten a little bit of a suntan today because I did walk for a few hours and it was hot. And if you know anything about Manitoba, we get a lot of sun. We get more sun than anywhere else in Canada. I don't know why. Even in the wintertime, you have to wear your sunglasses and stuff. Just right? It's just so sunny here, so sunny and clear. We have beautiful skies all the time here, right? Even right now, I don't see a cloud in the sky, and the sun is starting to come down now, right? So it's starting to get little orangey and stuff. It's kind of pretty. Okay, let me come down here. It's raining there too. Oh, your mom and dad, classical music. Yeah, I started listening to classical music sometimes if I'm going to do the dishes. For the most part, I like the silence. Maybe my air conditioner is on, but everything is off. I'm not listening to programs. I don't absorb well when programs are in the background. Sometimes if it is like a picture of Jordan Peterson on the screen, but it's a speech in the background, but whoever's right? Stolen the the clip, has just put a picture of Jordan Peterson there, right? I'm not going to sit here and stare at a picture, just the same picture through the entire 3 hour video, because some of these videos I watch are 3 hours. Some, right? And I can't do a 3 hour video in one sitting. I don't think I ever have, but I will break it up into two or three, depending on how much time I have in the course of the day. I'll break it up into 2 or 3 days, and I'll absorb it, right? For sure. And especially if it's some of my favorite content creators, for sure I'll be in it, right? Okay. But classical music, yeah, my dad liked Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky, marching bands. He loved Wagner was one of his favorites. I remember a specific album cover. I can see it in the just in my mind. This album cover, it was his favorite album, and he'd be playing it all the time, lots of times, because it was majority rule in our household. He got hockey night in Canada. For the most part, he didn't care too much about TV unless it was there was a wildlife television show that he really really loved too, and I can't remember the nature of things, but there was a wildlife. It was a show that was on TV for so long. It was sponsored by an insurance company. I remember that. And if it wasn't a documentary like that, he was not interested, and he would have those great big tire earmuff headphones over his head, and he'd be listening to his stereo and his albums, right? And all of us would be glued to the TV, right? Hear my mom chucking things at, get yourself away from the TV, 6 feet away from the TV, because they were always worried that we were going to ruin our eyes. That was the beginning of that kind of technology. They didn't know how it was going to affect our eyesight, right? Um, but yeah, they did take those. They did take those precaution, especially being kids. Saturday morning, oh my goodness, we were all laying on our bellies on the floor in front of the TV. My dad's big white Space Odyssey TV. He loved. My dad loved technology, but even like I said when I in the beginning of the conversation, in the '60s, right? It was it was just the day and age where we were in that knowledge and how to do it. It's a different state right now. But if we didn't follow through, if we don't allow ourselves to get swept up, we might be left behind, right? I can't imagine where I would be, right? Oh, I don't even want to, I don't even want to imagine where I might be. I suspect that my family would have taken care of me, right? But I wouldn't have been living a life for myself, right? I would have been living a life for my family. And right, that's unfortunate, and that's also the reason why I do the work that I do, that I delve in, so that you know nobody else has to give themselves up, right? Give themselves up. And we do, don't we? It's our hearts. And I know that you guys have those hearts too, because you're caregivers too, right? That's why I collect the caregivers here. We just caregive each other. And I think that's probably when you talk about groups and networks and communities, right? I think that would be my perfect choice in a community, right? It takes all kinds to make the world, and people that can kind of appreciate each other, and not take advantage of each other's kindnesses. That would make for a great world, right? There's a lot of amazing souls out there, but sometimes we gotta siphon through it. We can only do that for ourselves. We can't do that for other people, right? Because we're all looking and experiencing things in a different perspective. Okay, you guys, I'm still at the top in these comments here. I'm just totally lost. Okay. Um, Andrew says, oddly, no music in our house, though my father had played clarinet and my mother the viola. My brother and I started listening to top 40 on the stereo when we were in middle school. Uh, for me, music was only a place for me to escape to. When I was young, I literally, physically had to escape. I couldn't escape to music. Um, I just couldn't. I was too hyper vigilant in that, and I couldn't be in that in those surroundings. So I was always out. I was always at the parks and on my bike and at the beach and at the museums and at the movies or babysitting or up on the hill selling Kool-Aid or dandelions, right? I was always out and about physically, but physically outside, out and about, right? Um, I music was something I never attached myself to, except when I felt safe enough and I needed to escape. For me, they call it uh, well, I don't. It's not nice to call it what it is, but I get caught in the country music, you guys, because of the sad storytelling. And when I was in that state, I wanted to be in that state. That's part of escaping into yourself. That's part of just being in the horrid and the sad and the misery of it all. Um, Otherwise, for me, if it wasn't Donny Osmond or Barbara Streisand or the Bay City Rollers, I didn't really pay attention to the words in a song. Sometimes I would jump in a chorus, uh, only because the chorus is the main jingle part of a song, and sometimes music is around, and in the repetitiveness of hearing the beat, because that's what I would pay attention to is the beat, not the words, not the story within the words. I would sometimes chime in on the chorus, but that's me. That's not the norm. That is a hypervigilance trait. I couldn't wear headphones. I don't like to wear headphones. I want to hear the murderers, the burglars, the rapers. I want to hear them, right? But that's my hypervigilance. So I can't get the headphones. I'm right unless I'm feeling safe and comfortable. I know my door is locked and right that I feel safe and comfortable, then I can do it. And I do it when I'm editing video just so I can have a clear idea of the sounds and what's going to interfere with the creative part that I'm trying to put across in my adventure videos, right? So so yeah, music has never touched me that way, except like I said, in those sad moments, like when my marriage fell apart, or I was in love with somebody and somebody didn't love me, or I was in love with someone, but they were just not clicking the right way, or we were in that relationship for different reasons, right? And 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 so in those sad moments, yeah, I went I went into the music, but it would be country music, and then it would last for 6 months or a year, and then I would get distracted by something or someone else, and I would come alive again. I never allowed myself to die down. uh, it's not healthy to go that low. I see it within my own family. It's very devouring, and it's not good for our physical health because, again, what we think about is realized, and that stress, it really wears on us, especially in my family. That I have no idea how my dad was able to double his life expectancy, but he was able to do that. But it was a very stressful experience, and that was the one thing that we were supposed to keep at bay, right? Even in the 60s, they prescribed smoking for stress. My dad was a 2 pack a day smoker. He was always quitting. Even to the day he died, he actually, when he did pass away, he passed away at the nursing station where he stopped to let them know he was going outside for a cigarette, and he just dropped right there. So he never was able to overcome that addiction of smoking. But at the same time, that probably helped quite a bit in alleviating the stress, because they do say stress causes 75% of the physical illnesses out there. And I believe it. I believe it's my kind of middle ground. I don't go really high, don't go really low in my emotions. And I know I pop up really fast for a breath is up fresh, and the tools that I have, I just bring them to the table, and I utilize them, and I never get to that state where I'm super angry. I do give up though. Um, uh, but now that give up is with working in options, and in giving up it's breaking those relationships and those commitments in a way that is mutually convenient, well, maybe not convenient, but healthy, healthy in a healthy way, right? And that's still bettering things, right? I'm doing okay. I have not touched any of my money yet for my car. I haven't. I'm so proud of myself. It's not to say that it's not going to happen, but I'm going to do my very best, because I'm feeling things out. I'm trying to, well, I'm being called to slow it down and calm down, and to get the system back in order, calming the system down, but also make some recognition, a little bit of movement, and tidy up a lot of those loose ends. Oh my goodness. Right? I got a really juicy one this week. I just took it down because it was in the way. I don't know where I put it, but it was one by one of my uh, favorite one of my favorites that I love to learn from. She's an actual therapist, and she gave up her practice because she butted heads a little bit with some of those ideas, and she wanted to move again in her own movement rather than be dictated by somebody else's ideas. And so she's just doing this on her own. And she had a lesson this week, and she said, buying is not trying. And it hit me like a brick, because I always feel bad, when I give up on people, or when I give up on a situation and I go a different route, or I go, that's not my place to say this is what you should do, right? That this is somebody else's choices, and I have to stand back, and I feel bad about this, because sometimes I feel like maybe I do have that answer or that ability to help in some way, even if it's just to sit there, to have somebody just, right, just spill it out and get them out of their system, just to, right, because a lot of the stuff we just keep inside of us all the time, and it just pollutes and festers, and again, it's that what we think about is realized, and that stress that just ends up causing us physical issues. So grateful for my physical well-being, right? And things are not perfect. I think I woke up last night with Charlie horses in one of my feet. I had to get up and kind of walk around my living room for a few minutes. But I went for a walk, and probably did not drink enough water fluids when I got home. I'll be sure tonight before I go to bed to drink a big bunch of fluids and get them into, we're not talking coffee, but a whole bunch of good hydrating fluids in me, because I did go for a walk, and it was very hot today. And I didn't take a drink with me, and I was hauling possibly. I'm not sure. It was either a 10-pound bag. Can I see it? It's sitting there. A 10-pound bag or 20-pound bag of potatoes, and I carried it around with me on my walk because I got it on such a good price, right? And I wasn't going home in that direction. Because I don't like to go home the same way as the way I come. I always take different routes because it's different landscapes, right? Different views. It is a walk after all. Okay. Um, but yeah, music has never been a big thing for me. Um, I don't know why, but I kind of delve into it every once in a while, but I do believe it has something to do with the hypervigilance, and because I can easily get trapped in that, because usually, again, as a child, that I would want to escape. When I wanted to escape, I actually truly escaped in the physical outside. I didn't right go to my room and sit at my desk. I didn't, right, I didn't go to another part of the house. I'd just get out of there as fast as I can, and I would go somewhere else. Like I said, we were feral children in the 70s, 100%. Okay. I love playing on the maypole. I loved tetherball. You guys remember tetherball as a kid? I was a tetherball champion. Nobody could beat me at tetherball. I was so good. Mind you, I had a little bit of weight. I don't know if I had a little bit of weight. I look back at myself in those days, mentally and emotionally. I felt like the fattest kid, obese, disgusting. I felt that. But when I look at pictures of myself, and I have to recognize that that wasn't the case. I don't know how I got those ideas. I do believe it was the fear my parents had that I would end up like my grandmother and my uncles and stuff. So, and because it ran in the family, that they were a little bit concerned that I would have a problem with that too. So they kind of controlled what I ate. And it caused me some problems because to me that felt like punishment, because I was on diets at a very, very young age. And when I look at myself at that age of 6 and 7, and I was just a regular kid. There was no obesity. There was no weight issues. Those weight issues were projections that I believed to be true in the end. And I took them on as belief, and they caused me lifelong problems. Oh my goodness, lifelong problems, even to this day. You guys know I love my pink ice donuts with sprinkles, and that's just an analogy. The honest truth was, when I went on my walk today, I went into one of the grocery stores, and there was like this big bag of popcorn. I said, "Oh, that's a nice healthy treat. There's not a lot of calories in that. Let's get this big bag of popcorn." And I just went to a park and sat on the park bench, and I ate handfuls of that popcorn. And then when I came home tonight, I ate a couple more handfuls before I said, "Oh, I gotta go for a nap." And I went for a nap. Yeah, so I do have issues, but these are not issues that I believe that are permanent, because I have dieted many times. I have gotten down to low weights a few times, and I know if I've done it once, I can do it again because the formula is still there. And also being more mature. And I look at myself right now, right? And I think of myself as heavy and obese and unpresentable because I'm in my live shows and stuff. But in reality, am I? Right? There was a time I wouldn't even wear makeup, like, right? Or I wouldn't leave the house without the makeup on. Not wearing makeup is something that I have just recently in the past 6 years, right? I look at Pamela Anderson and I said, "Oh my goodness, I did that before you did, Pamela." But it's so true that makeup clogged my pores, and I was just trying to cover myself up, making myself what I thought more acceptable to other people. In reality, nobody cared. And I think in reality, again, I look better without makeup than I did with makeup, in all honest truth. And it saves so much in my day. in my getting prepared for the day, and also knowing that I have to spend time getting ready and spending all that time on my makeup. Sometimes maybe I wouldn't even want to go out because it would be such a long, tedious process, right? I don't know. Things to think about. Okay, let's come down here. Um, Top 40s. I did put the top 40s on last week when I was just doing some housework. I says I'm not going online today, right? I'm like helium balloons and I don't need any lessons. Let's just get some house projects done. Let's get ready for the week and because right, I'm being distracted and I have a distraction battle plan, and for the life of me, I can't get on it at all. Soon as I recognize how badly distracted I get, I just crashed in that, and so right, I'm trying to get back on tomorrow. I'll be back on it. I even went back on it yesterday thinking yesterday was Friday, possibly. I think possibly I thought yesterday was Friday when it was Saturday. I came in. I came in yesterday and and I said, we're going to be back on right the distraction battle plan on Monday, and yeah, and tomorrow's Monday already, and I haven't even worked on that. So I want to make a little list of my morning and early afternoon. I'm not going to extend it too far out. I'm going to make some big projects that I want to work on, but I'm going to get right whatever is on my agenda from the time I get up to early in the afternoon. I want to be as tight as I can be just to show myself that I can do it. I did a little bit extra this week, right? Maybe that will show, maybe it won't. It's okay, right? Because it is in that practice and in that little bit of movement, baby steps, getting better and better all the time. Okay, you guys. Oh my goodness, I'm pulling it in a little bit late today, but that's because I came in late today. But I haven't even gotten halfway through those comments, so let's just finish up these comments if you guys don't mind. If you have to go, say your good night. I'll get down to that comment and I'll appreciate that you called it a night. Oh, William made it in tonight. Hello, William. Owen says, I had my first transistor in the 60s. Love listening at night. Oh, I did have little transistor radios. We take those to the beaches. But again, I wasn't laying on the beach. I was out in the water, right? That was before Jaws, but yeah, yeah, I remember the little transistor radios too. Um, Andrew says, just today I was thinking about Joshua Bell, the famous violinist who is from Bloomington. If his parents weren't connected with the university, maybe Joshua's talent would never have been known. Right? Andrew, you are 100%. It is in those little bit of serendipities that, I know, Andrew, you being a believer in Jesus and God, right? That you put your faith in God. God knows what's going on. They put Trump in charge or they put Musk in charge, right? Maybe they're catalysts, maybe they're not. Maybe they're not doing a good job. Maybe they are doing a good job, but they were put in place, and it's not like God doesn't know that wasn't God's plan. And for us to make such a fuss and to right, we get a say in that it's in our choices because God doesn't know unless we speak to him about this horrible stuff that's going on. If there's horrible stuff going on. But I don't worry about these things because these are not worries for Cindy. These are worries for God. This is God's plan. So yeah, I don't worry about that stuff. But yeah, you're right. It is in the way things come together. It was even like why I'm here tonight in my live because I wasn't going to come live tonight because I thought it was Saturday. I don't go online on Saturday. I barely even pick up my telephone and go into Instagram or anything. I'm almost completely offline. except for the lessons that I'm in. Sometimes, quite often, I am in the lessons. That's where I can actually devote a great big deal of time. But it's also in getting me outside for walks, connecting with Mother Nature, connecting with my family, and doing a little bit of solid work for myself without the responsibility and the accountability to make sure that I'm showing up for somebody else. That I take that load off of myself for that one day. I didn't do it this week. Well, good job, Sydney. Right? That was a mistake, but still, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. Okay. Um, Andrew again says, the longer I live, the more I see how little people taught me I was growing up. Uh, I now wonder if I am both my brothers have or had autism, maybe from vaccinations. No wonder I was called weird. Autism is, I suspect that there is a capacity to have some autism in my own life. It does come from trauma. It does come from being sensitive and being um, bombarded by the opposite of being sensitive, and it's quite common. Also, another one that it might not be autism, could be high functioning, um, but it could also be ADHD. And for me, it's either or it could be a little bit of both. But it is, I think, it is in my experiences that I get to recognize certain parts of myself, or I get to overcome certain parts of myself. So sometimes it's not recognizable anymore. And that's probably a good a good thing. But yeah, I wouldn't beat yourself up. I know lots of people, they go in to get properly diagnosed. It's fairly common to be in the spectrum. And if your brother, right, is highly autistic, then maybe there would be a trait there for you too, Andrew. I know for myself that I suspect that there's a little bit of trait of autistic, but autistic only means a different way of thinking, that we are creative in the way that we perceive things. And in that, right, I recognize that trait in myself. And if you said that people thought you were weird, Andrew, you were your own person, and it's possible that you had a little bit on that spectrum, but that's not much to worry about because we all know your nature, Andrew, and you've got a great head on your shoulders, and you've done quite well for yourself and for your brother during the course of your life. And again, sometimes it's in that high functioning that we beat ourselves up, and that guilt and shame makes it think that it's our responsibility. But if you don't feel like you can properly care for yourself, right? Because autism is a lot. And I suspect that I neglect myself in that way a little bit too at times, right? I've never been diagnosed with everything. For my fear with growing up, because in the 60s and 70s, it was my mother used us kids as blackmail against my father. My father's One of my father's greatest dreams and investment was in his family, right? And she would use the kids when they would have these big scrap blowouts, and he that's it, I'm gone. And he would try to leave, but mom would slap us around, we'd all be bawling, and she knew how much I loved dad, and she'd get me all worked up, and I think dad is leaving us forever. And it was her way of calming my dad down and getting the situation overcome, right? And that was really, really, really hard on me, right? But in those days, kids didn't get to leave their wives and get custody of the kids, right? And my mother, they get in their fights, she always threatened him in his mentality and in his addictions, and those anything she could drum up, she would use them against him. But I got a fear in me because I was brought up in that understanding that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, that I was afraid that the authorities would find out. And I wanted to have children. So I was afraid that, right, my children would be taken away from me. And that was a little bit of fear in me. And that's, you know, there were other reasons as to why I didn't have children. But having something that huge on me my entire life, I thought, oh, if I ever have kids, they're gonna find out that I'm strange, I'm crazy, right? Especially, when I get heartbroken the way I was, and I would just like, right, I wouldn't care about myself, right? I would just be in such a sad state with my country music that it was kind of thoughts that ran in my head. These were thoughts even that were kind of programmed into me in some of those conversations and lessons from the guardianship in my life, not my father's side, but my father dictated too. He worked a lot under the surface, right? He couldn't go up against my mom in the normal way because my mother was very volatile, right? You didn't know what was coming from one moment to the next. So, I trust that my father worked things the best that he could under the surface. And right, it worked. I'm here, right? And my optimistic attitude has served me well. It really has served me well, even when things were not going well, right? It made it a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more bearable. And, you know, if I'm going to talk about gratefulness, I'm going to have to throw it out there because these are lessons that lots of people they don't have to get to have in their entire life, and that's pretty sad. Lessons are learned through difficult times. Sometimes they're learned through the fun of it and the adventure of it, and for me it was a combination of it all. Yeah. Okay. Andrew says, the longer I live, the more I see how little people taught me as I was growing up. I now wonder if, yeah, I read that one already. Autistic, yeah, so don't beat yourself up. But you know what? If you're curious, Andrew, oh, but in the States, you guys pay for the insurance, don't you? That you have to pay for services. See, for me, I could go to a walking clinic and say that I wanted to talk to somebody in the field of psychology or therapy, and then go the route of a proper diagnosis. I don't know if it would be recognizable in me anymore, in all truth, right? I'd like to think that because I do still get triggered, but it's nothing like it used to be, right? I kept my job 5 years. That was pretty good for somebody whose marriage fell apart. She couldn't even keep a job for 6 months after that. And I did that for couple of decades before I was able to land this job. So the lessons are the lessons, right? And you have to take that opportunity when they come across your path, and you get to decide whether to work with them or not work with them. But yeah, if you want to work with them, Andrew, if you want to know, yeah, go see your doctor and get a referral. They'll have some conversations. She'll answer some questions, maybe fill out some forms, and then they'll let you know, right, what their idea is. And you'll find out what your personality type is. You got a personality type, but whether that personality type is a good type or a difficult type with challenges, I'd like to know if my personality type offered up challenges. I know it does, right? But because, right, that stigma that I had given myself as a young adult, right? That if I have this on the record, if I go see a psychologist, it's on paper, right? And if somebody wanted to take my kids away, they would be able to do it because, right? People were all the time telling me I was crazy, right? I grew up that way. I felt that way. And I must have truly felt that way to think that way, right? And what you think about is realize I didn't have kids. So keep that into consideration, right? Okay, you guys, it's getting late. We're going to tie this up. I'm almost down there. We're just going to quickly go over some of these. Thank you so much, you guys. It was nice to see William. Thank you so much. At the mall here in Bloomington, I've noticed the removal of seating out in the concourse areas, not many places for people to sit, maybe to keep people moving and to keep people homeless from loitering. Yeah, here in Winnipeg, all the glass windows and everything are off the bus shacks. They break them and they're not being replaced. So when it's 40 below zero, there's nowheres for the homeless to stay except for the churches. There's quite a few churches here in Winnipeg that open their doors and they give them a place to sleep, and they feed them breakfast in the morning before heading them back out onto the streets. But yeah, it is the way of life now. Even the benches, they put these bars in between, and a heavier lady couldn't sit down because they'd be sitting with the bar crammed up their bum because they're leaving these bars on there so people don't sleep on the benches, right? You can't sleep comfortably with all these bars sticking out, but it's right. It's a inhumane way to to make note, to right, to make to plaster who are the good people and who are the bad people. Somebody who's homeless, oh my goodness. Somebody said to me, Cindy, you're the most horrible person, because I was just walking down the street with my shopping cart and all my belongings, doing the very best that I could to get by. That would be heartbreaking. And if I needed a place to sleep, and I saw that, there's perfectly good bench that I could lay down on, but because they don't want me to lay there, because I might not look good, it might make the neighborhood look bad, that that is in my face saying, no, right? You're not worthy, right? So I don't know. My heart goes out. There's a lot of homeless, right? But the homeless were somebody I've always recognized, right? Because of the family dynamics. Even within my own family, my grandfather on my dad's side was an alcoholic. He was a bus shack, right? Alcoholic. He would disappear for months at a time on these binges, and then he'd straighten himself out. Sometimes he'd go 6 months, and he was such a nice man, hard worker, right? But as soon as he started drinking, he was like, oh, right, demon himself. Yeah. So, but again, that's in our choices, and if we could just do better by our children, right? That's the whole idea. We're messed up. I'm messed up. I thought, right, they were going to take my kids away because somebody might think I was cuckoo, right? Maybe might have even thought I was even more cuckoo with some of these conversations that I have. But this is the world that we live in, and I can't beat myself up because, right? I got a message to get out there. I got a brand I'm building. And it's in my optimistic idea that if I don't have that job over my head, I got to ground in something anyway. I might as well ground in my brand. Okay. Oh, really? Oh, so you have been to Greenwich Village then, Owen? That would have been neat. Andrew says, I'm guessing it's intentional. I've read books such as Call It the Mall and Why We Buy, that deal with how businesses are laid out in a very intentional way. And digital age, you guys, is just one salesman after another. Oh my goodness, it's kind of crazy town. I love marketing, right? I love the idea of being able to get a message across, but I want to do it in the way of conversation. Right? If somebody phone solicitors, I walk into a store, I want to browse the store. I don't want the salesperson to be on me and beside me and hanging up clothes as I'm looking at them. I trying to make that sale. I just want to be left alone and have the choice for myself. And there are more and more of those people out there, right? Sales should be able to be made through the need of it. and not because it's being pushed on somebody. 100%. There are a lot of useless items out in the world. There are a lot of useless items that we buy just because it's got a brand name on it. Sometimes it's just a cool little gadget. Oh, look how this peels the skins off of grapes. I need to have this, right? And you never use it. But the marketing got you, the message got you, the convenience got you, right? Okay, here in the US, we have New Madrid fault in the center of the country. If that shifts in a big way, we could have destruction up to Chicago and down Texas. Oh my goodness. I was in a live show last night. One of the big geologists in the world, it's his passion. He came online last night. He says, "You guys, these readings are right off the chart. These readings are like what happened in Turkey in, they mentioned the year 2014 or something like that." And he says, this looks like there's a big one coming. We're not talking a little 7.7 on the Richter scale. We're talking something major, major. And this was last night. And today, when I got up this afternoon, well, I got up this morning, but this afternoon, before I went out, I was Googling the weather and stuff. So I just Googled to see. I just went earthquakes past 24 hours. And I was very surprised. There were 8 earthquakes over point 0.5 on the Richter scale, and so I was really surprised that there were quite a few big earthquakes. I mean, 5, that's enough to break your ornaments and, right, have the shingles come off the ceiling and stuff. That for sure it is, right? Maybe not enough to have a skyscraper fall, but it's enough, right? 8 of them just in one day. I thought that was pretty incredible. But yeah, we'll see if this gentleman is right. It was like around 10 o'clock last night where he went live, and he says this is indicating something. But he says it's the build up, right? Nothing is being released, so all that's going is the build up, and it's the build up that makes the big ones, right? So he says we'll see if it releases. Maybe it might not happen, but if it's building, then it's going to be huge. Um, I've had some downtime between work projects. It's been great. I'm going back early because of a project has been running beyond schedule, but I may be needed for only 3 mornings. Oh, fantastic, Andrew. Get a lot of rest in that. Treat yourself good. Delve into some of your interests, right? Right? Enjoy your life a little bit. Okay, I see so many people walking around while wearing headphones or looking at a cell phone. Oh, I bump into people all the time. Sometimes I just have to stand on the sidewalk because I don't know if they're just going to walk right into me because they're not even looking up or anything. So I just kind of stand straight so that I can just kind of put my hand out if they do walk into me, because I have no idea. I don't know which way to maneuver myself in order not to come into contact that way. But you're 100%. All we are all face attached to our phones, and it's going to take some adjustment to this AI learning age that we're in right now. Well, AI is actually part of the digital age. It's only a subcategory, right? But AI is pretty huge. Digital age might disappear, but I think AI will probably keep moving forward, right? Because the higher the technology, right? It's not like we play Atari anymore. We're into, right, PlayStation number 5, right? Okay. I see so many people out there walking around, and you're right with that with the headphones. Owen says, yeah, all over the place, Owen. Uh, Andrew says, I hate it when I walk into a store and one of the staff asks, "How are you?" I refuse to do that when I worked in a bookstore. A lot of people are having trouble, and it's a bad question to ask. It's intrusive, isn't it? A lot of it too is because of the thievery and the state that people are in, that we are becoming less trusting of each other. and some of it is for the security of it, but a lot of it is for the potential of a bigger sale or a sale. It's the world that we live in. Oh my goodness, we came down to the last comment, you guys. Let's say goodnight before something else pulls us into a conversation. I'm again very sorry that I came in late today. I apologize for that. Like I said, I have no idea where I lost that day. Kind of proud of myself that I went live seven times this week. So every day I posted every day this week. So that's pretty amazing. So I'm happy for that. But I do want to make sure that I stick to my own routine because I do matter and I love showing up here, right? And I said, well, maybe I'm going to take tomorrow off. But you guys know I probably won't. I'm probably going to just show up anyway. But if I don't show up tomorrow, I'm taking a rest day, right? But more than likely, I'll still be here. What we're going to talk about, I have no idea. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming into my live. You want to give me a thumbs up before you walk out the door? That would be nice, right? I always forget for people to give me a thumbs up, but I always do appreciate that you do come and hang out with me. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you next week.